Welcome, everyone, to the April 8th edition of Wednesday with Walton and Reis here at thecardinalnation.com and via all your favorite podcast apps. I'm Brian Walton, and this is my partner, Kyle Reis. Welcome, Kyle.
Hello, Brian. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. First thing I want to talk about, Kyle, is this rising star in Memphis behind the plate, Jimmy Crooks. You wrote about Jimmy, and you were glowing in your praise of him. Now, this winter, not too long ago, Jimmy Crooks didn't make your top 10 in the system. I ranked him fifth. Now, all of a sudden, Jimmy Crooks has like a week of good baseball, and you're over the moon for him. What's going on, Kyle?
Brian, I'm glad this gives us a chance to start right off the bat. I did not write that headline. You sure eventually you'll find out if you haven't already. I know Daniel Shoptaw, our friend C70, knows this. I hate puns. I am not a fun. I like when they happen accidentally, but when they are planted like a bomb, it drives me nuts. But so I did not come up with that headline. But I will say, God bless Jimmy Crooks for getting off to as hot of a start as he can. I had that article. Article comes out on Monday. Deadline Sunday. I had the article written pretty well by Saturday morning. Of course, Saturday Memphis got rained out, and Jimmy Crooks is like 0 for 3 with 2 walks and 2 strikeouts since. So there's no accounting for what's going to happen, and this is why the small sample size is very difficult. But what's really stood out to me about Jimmy Crooks and why I decided to write about him as opposed to Blaze Jordan, who might end up getting the article next week, is because it's his work behind the plate. He's only caught 3 of the 6 games he's played in, but he has looked impressive, impressive, impressive behind the plate, and that's the difference for me, Brian. That's why I thought he deserved the extra accolades. He looks like he leveled up behind the plate as much as he's taken huge strides at the plate.
And you like to see a guy who, obviously, if he's a human being, he's disappointed that that wasn't able to stay with St. Louis. And instead of feeling sorry for himself and playing poorly, he's going to force their hand at some point. I looked up. I think Pozo's only had five plate appearances all year. He's basically not being used as the third catcher. And at some point, they're going to have to do something, I think.
I do too, Brian. It's actually been a pretty poor defensive showing by the only 2 catchers, because Pozo's just been like a pinch hitter. He has not caught it all, if I'm correct. The 2 catchers, both Ivan Herrera and Pedro Pages for the St. Louis Cardinals, have been bad. They've just been bad. Herrera he showed some positives about game calling, but we're back to watching him bounce balls to second base, trying to get runners, trying to catch runners stealing. That's not going to work. We thought that this might happen early on, and it's about how he advances throughout the year. The one thing I didn't anticipate is Pedro Pages playing absolutely poorly behind the plate. He's not blocking balls. He's calling a poor game. He looks exhausted behind the plate. He looks tired. And of course that says nothing for how he's at the plate, how he's
That's
hitting.
not
So
that's not a good sign. 10 games into a 162 game season.
that's it, Brian. Yeah, great point. So I would think, part of, obviously, I have an agenda too of writing about Jimmy Crooks, and this is where I kind of got caught. Is I didn't want to write about him, and I thought, you know what, it's just so bad right now at the major league level, so early on, and he's been so good. Well, he deserves the extra attention. Hopefully he can carry that momentum.
In all fairness, when you're evaluating Crooks versus Jordan, Crooks is on the 40 man. He has major league experience. There's a path to him for playing time if some other moves happen. Blaze Jordan isn't on the 40 man, left exposed in Rule 5. Certainly has potential, but to me, he has more Luke and Baker potential than probably a starter in the major leagues for a long time, which I think Crooks could do.
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. But it's funny. Yeah, and I love the way that you framed it, even though you were, kind of joking at the beginning. But though they're 2 prospects that I'm not exactly the highest on entering the year, both Blaze Jordan and Jimmy Crooks. And we've talked about it before. Sometimes you have to be won over a little bit, and to watch Jimmy Crooks take huge steps, with both hitting the ball harder, better plate discipline, and the work behind the plate. Blaze Jordan's doing the same things, but we'll see if that lasts. It's nice to see them both striking the ball really hard.
Yeah, and over the winter, you were much more optimistic on Blaze than I was. You had him 25th. I had him 39th. I'm still from Missouri a little bit about Blaze Jordan. I think he is a good AAA player, and we'll see if there's more there. But the Cardinals didn't give up a ton to get him, and we'll see how he does with a year at AAA.
Yeah, yeah. It's been, it's hard not to talk about Cesar Prieto, too, when you talk about what's going on at Memphis, because the three of these players that we've talked about have been a catalyst for the offense. You know, two lefties and a righty. Cesar Prieto has played a great defensive shortstop. I mean, I did not expect that to happen. He's been all over the place and making off balance throws and getting to balls that I didn't think he was capable of getting to. And so that's something with, and also hitting the ball really well. So it's interesting to see all three of those guys who, you know, Blaze Jordan doesn't really count here, but he does in some ways because of how highly the Cardinals regard him. But the three guys who have flirted with the 40 man, who have been on the 26, two of the three guys who have been on the 40 man, who have flirted with the 26 man, have been on the 26 man, and then Blaze Jordan, they've all kind of a little older, flirting with the major leagues. Like it's interesting that they're the three that were kind of seizing their opportunity so far early on in the Memphis season.
And it's hard for me to see Ramon Urias, despite the fact he's hit a couple home runs and all. A team like the Cardinals, I guess they wanted to have veteranness. I guess they wanted to have backfill if Gorman, imploded. But you look at Urias and say, well, why aren't they getting a look at Prieto? Why aren't they looking at Torres? I mean, these are guys that are on the 40 man that are basically blocked in Memphis. And maybe they were worried about Mason Wynn's health. We've seen he's been had a couple of nicks here already early in the year, but I don't think they're having to hedge their bets on Weatherholt. So you know Urias is, and I don't want to say it's another Brandon Crawford. I hope it's not. And folks probably remember Brandon Crawford as a experienced major league shortstop at the end of his career. They brought him in. He lasted till I don't know what, about August, maybe July or August, and they cut him loose. I hope that doesn't happen with Urias, but for a team that is trying to focus on young people, you've got a couple of infielders in Torres and Prieto that are basically totally blocked.
Yeah, yeah. God, I always forget about the Brandon Crawford of it all. I feel like Cardinal fans were ready for him to go almost immediately too. You know, he just got out to such a poor start. It's been nice to see Ramon Urias, our once and future legend, get off to a hot start, to hit the ball, have a couple home runs early on, a couple big home runs, and to play a really solid defensive third base. That has been nice. But yeah, Brian, especially this year, the last thing you want to see the Cardinals do is blocking players from a chance at maybe carving out a role at the major league level.
Well, and the expectations were set quite a bit higher. Hey, we're going to get a right-handed bat. We thought based on his spring, Velasquez was going to be that guy. That didn't happen, and he's off to a very cold start in AAA. But I mean, Urias isn't known for his bat. He's just not. And granted, like you said, he's done well early on, and so I don't want to diss that. But it just didn't seem like a move that was in sync with the rest of what's going on.
I agree, Brian.
All right, so we talked a little bit about Memphis. Let's talk a little bit about the pitching side in Memphis. Pete Hansen starting a rehab now, which is good because he'd been on the injury list. He was pitching all along, but he got behind a little bit. He had a minor injury earlier in camp, and so he wasn't building up his innings like he needed to for the regular season. But the fact that he's ready to go pitch in games at Palm Beach suggests he's maybe a few weeks away, and that might fit well with the timing of Hunter Dobbins, who is down there on a rehab. Is going to. I think he's making his second start tonight. If I'm,
Yes.
and of course, this is Tuesday night. We're doing this. Big surprise. It's not Wednesday morning. We're still in bed when you're listening to this.
Yeah.
But Dobbins. At some point, they'll have to figure out what to do with Dobbins as well. And it could be that if he continues to pitch well, he might be into the rotation, and one of the starters goes to the pen. And God knows, the Cardinals need stable bullpen help at this point. And it's not probably going to come from Memphis because here's the names of the 40-man relievers in Memphis. Roy Croft, already been sent down. Ryan Fernandez, already been sent down. And Tink Hence, who has about 5 minutes at AAA.
It's been bleak, Brian. What I mean, again, I last week I was on record as saying, I don't think this bullpen's going to be as bad as the start they've gotten off to, and boy, have they gotten worse.
What do you? I mean, Packy Naughton might be the guy, but who are you going to take off the 40 man? You going to take off Prieto? You going to take off Torres? I mean, maybe Ryan Fernandez. Maybe they'll finally cut bait on Ryan Fernandez, who hasn't been good for a long time.
Yeah,
But he's been good in AAA for what in the four game small sample size.
Yeah, but that's also been rocky too because you could tell he hasn't been commanding the ball particularly well in those couple of appearances. So that's really their only other option here. They, because of the decisions that they've made with George Soriano, and of course Matt Pouchard. They said that today being Tuesday, that on Tuesday he was throwing a little bit, made about 20 throws. We'll see how quickly they bring him back. But because of some of the decisions they've made, I feel like it's safe to assume that unless they can find a trade partner for Ryan Fernandez, and of course maybe that means that they do have to try to put him on waivers first. That I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I guess what I'm trying to say is I would not be surprised at all if he's pitching out of the Cardinals bullpen within the next week if they keep on this trek, because why not, more than anything. So we'll see about that.
Yeah. The other move that's potentially affecting the Memphis rotation, or may not, is Hansel Rincon, who
Yeah.
was pitching very well last year, got injured late in the year, still only has about 50 career innings at Double A, but Rincon was brought up, and it's not clear at this point whether he's going to step into the rotation. He's not lined up to pitch Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, at least as a starter, but it could be that he's there for bulk innings, just like Schuster is with St. Louis.
Yeah, I'm excited for him. I hope this isn't just one of those like, oh, let's get him a couple innings and then send him back down. Like, I think his changeup will play well at AAA. I really do. I think his fastball is a little vulnerable there. It'll probably tick down of a mile an hour or so, like everyone else's has. So I think I really do hope he gets a chance, and I hope he gets a chance to start. He came out of relief for Springfield and pitched decently. I think he let up a home run, but he still pitched really well in a couple innings, and uh,
Threw
you know,
about 30 pitches. He was piggybacking Cijntje, interestingly, that first start. I don't know if it was a piggyback or not. Certainly Cijntje is probably going to start every time, and he will start again this week. But yeah, Rincon did not start in his first appearance with Springfield.
yeah, yeah. So it'll be interesting. That's so. What I like about it is it's the first like real promotion of the year, right? The first real promotion, and it's an exciting one. He's an exciting player. I don't. Maybe he ends up being somebody who like Angel Rincon, right? Somebody like that. Maybe he makes that. He makes a major league debut and is never anything more than that. Maybe he never makes it to the majors. You don't know, but he's just an interesting arm that does some stuff, and he commands the ball really well.
You got to get some arms up in Memphis that are pushing to get to St.
Yeah,
Louis. And Rincon is older. I mean, he's not that old. He's 20, what, three maybe,
yeah,
24 at most.
yeah,
But he's been in the system a long time because he signed as a teenager. And he's already been free agent eligible. He came back for another year. So Rincon really has to earn his way onto the 40-man roster this year. And the way to do that is to pitch well at Memphis. So we'll see what happens. The good news is that Springfield doesn't really need him.
yeah.
Uh, Chen Wei Lin is making his first start on Tuesday night, and the long-awaited Liam Doyle introduction is going to happen on Wednesday. And I've read people saying, why is Doyle the number 5 starter? And Doyle's not the number 5 starter. It's just the way they wanted to balance his workload. They decided to wait and have him be the 5th one to take the mound in a game. It doesn't mean that he's a better, the 5th best starter in that rotation. That's not the case. People get hung up on this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 thing, I think, too much.
Absolutely, Brian. Absolutely. And you know what? I just want to say too, if he ends up being the fifth best starter in that rotation at this very moment to start the year, A, that would be amazing. And B, there's a like again, I do not mean this to beat up on Liam Doyle, but there's steps that he's gonna have to take this year. He might actually be, I think he and Shen Len are about at the same point as far as like what they do, right? Now, Len's fastball is his weakness, and his changeup slider is where he makes his money. Whereas Doyle's all fastball with the
Other way
splitter that
around.
can exactly where splitter can go a little bit, and he's still trying to develop his slider. But the command is the issue. The slider is sort of an issue, and they're building blocks. They're trying to get better. They're trying to get better. The good news is Doyle hasn't had a decrease in velocity where we know Shen Len has. So it's interesting to see. But I'm just saying that like when you look at the guys who pitched, they're really good. At Springfield. So I think it's a good thing to do. Again, to throttle back innings, to put them on an innings workload where you can manage it a little bit better as a fifth starter. But and also some of the hype, tempt out some of the hype. But I think it also shows you that like he is where he is right now, and that's not bad for your fifth overall draft pick.
To be
You know
starting in Double A, no, that's not a bad thing. No,
exactly.
that's a very good thing. And you touched on an important point. I'd like to just elaborate on that a little more. I don't think we talked about it here, but maybe we did. But Doyle's innings versus Franklin's innings this year, because of course Franklin down in Peoria had a tremendous start. I mean, drew attention nationally. I think Baseball America wrote him up, and a number of others got really excited. But as you pointed out, his workload last year was as a reliever, so the Cardinals aren't going to give him 25 or 30 starts this year.
No, no. And if they, my guess, again, I don't know this for a fact, and I'm hopeful that I get to ask about this in the coming days. He pitched 3 2/3 of an inning, and my guess would be is that it's all going to be pitch count driven. It's not going to be innings driven. It's going to be pitch count. I would bet he gets 65 for the first 2 months of the season. He'll get 65 to 75 pitches. The next 2 months, 75 to 85, and then they might throttle him back a little bit. Brian, that's one thing that both the old administration and the new administration did, at least in the small time frame, is once they get to the Major League All-Star break time, you'll see guys miss starts and there'll be bullpen starts and then they'll come out in late July and August and pitch in earnest again. So that's what I think will happen here. So that's my guess.
And you'd also think maybe by that time we'll see guys like Robertson and Henderson and Jerpy and maybe even Clark, right?
So and Holiday too,
and Ellisalt. So there's a bunch of guys that are in. I mean, there's at least one plus good strong roster of pitchers that aren't able to pitch right now. So later in the season, maybe when they have to dial back the innings a little bit on some of these guys that were drafted in 2025, there'll be others to step in and pick up the workload.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, man, it's just so much talent and it's so exciting. It's almost hard to believe,
Yeah, I was just thinking, if Doyle's the fifth best starter on Springfield, I mean, I'm going to go bet the house on them taking the championship again because, I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, and they entered Tuesday night's play 3-0, right? Memphis is 8-1. They're 3-0. It's amazing right now what's going on at the high levels. Of course, Peoria and Palm Beach have struggled, but like that, it's a great start for them.
But Peoria has a lot of potential, I think, on that roster, and they just need to get it together. But before we leave Springfield, you happened to be watching the game at that time. I missed it when Daniel Ortiz was injured, and he was put on the injured list the next day. What did you see when you saw that play when he was at the plate?
Yeah, to kind of give the play-by-play of that, he took a swing, missed the baseball, and on his backswing, he hit the catcher. And he immediately, I can't remember if he dropped the bat or not, but he immediately grabbed for his right hand. And, I have not heard any, other than that he was put on the 7-day IL. I have not heard any update on what it might be, what they're worried about, but he was in a tremendous amount of pain. He went down almost immediately. He got up, moved around, and then went back down again. He was in real obvious pain. And then as soon as he could get his stomach about him, he was right down the stairs into the clubhouse.
Yeah. So it may not be a 7-day, and we don't want to speculate about it, but it certainly didn't look good.
Yeah, to be honest with you, Brian, it reminded me of Alaris Montero is what it reminded me of a little bit, and that's enough. I have prospect whiplash, Brian. I have been hurt so many times, and because of that, again, it's probably not fair to draw the parallel, especially when it's all speculation at this point. But it just had that feel about it, like, oh, here's a guy who tore up the low levels in the minor leagues, who gets to Springfield, has a hand injury, and can never reclaim his power. So hopefully this is just a bump in the road for Mr. Daniel Ortiz.
Yeah, let's hope that's the case. And another guy who had a hand injury, unfortunately, is the Cardinals outfield that they drafted last year, Matthew Mura. He had a hamate bone injury, and that's a tricky one to come back from. And he's on the injured list at Palm Beach. Really didn't play. I don't think I saw him play all spring, so I'm not sure if he was injured right at the beginning of camp or he was injured over the winter. But that's another potential long-term outage. Before we leave Springfield, as I said, Baseball America wrote up their view of the hottest pitching prospects right now, and they talked about Tanner Franklin. But above him, they talked about Jurrangelo Cijntje. And we've seen now, I saw it at the end of spring camp. It was the same in his first outing. They let him throw left-handed to one batter in a crucial situation, and he walks the batter. And I would imagine it would be tough not having fully warmed up, from the left side to come in and say, okay, throw 3 strikes quickly and get this guy out. But it seems like that's going to be the gig that he's going to have this year.
And they're giving him just enough of a carrot with it for him to convince him that it's the wrong thing to do. Like this, right? This is what you do with your kids. You're like, yeah, you could try it once. Go ahead, try it once, and it doesn't go well, and they get discouraged, and you never have to worry about that thing again.
Yeah, put your hand on that burner. See how it feels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Folks, don't try that at home.
Oh yeah, as my girlfriend reminds me, who is an actual parent, not me. That's not anything parents do.
No,
So
no, no, no.
again, I should not be a parent, and I'm basically not. And thank goodness for that. But yeah, so what I will say is that again, he walked the one batter he threw to left-handed, but that was that was smooth operating. That was one of the easiest 5.2 innings of pitching to start that I've seen in years.
By the way, I want to interject. When I saw him in Florida, he immediately, when he switched his glove over, he was throwing 95. He was throwing 95 from the left side. I mean, it wasn't throwing 98, 99, but 95 from the left side. I was like, what a talent.
Yeah, an absolute beast of an athlete. Watching him, he made a really good play off the mound too. I think in our write up, Brian, I wanted to make a point to really emphasize what kind of an athlete he is. I think sometimes the carnival act of throwing both, with both your hands, you think that you think about the work that went into it. I don't know if you can necessarily harness or understand the athleticism a player has. I think when they do that, it gets lost. But when you watch this kid move on the off the mound and on and off the mound, he is a real athlete. Like this is like I want to know what this guy bowls. I want to know how good he is at tennis. Like how much of like Mookie Betts is this guy? Where he's rolling 300s, and I think he's that kind of athlete.
Heck of a trade, at least early on. I think that the returns are good. Obviously, there's disappointment about Clark being injured, but so far, I mean, we look at some of the other guys a little lower in the system. Mason Molina is not lower in the system. He's a guy that you singled out as having made great strides this spring. He's in the Double A rotation. Ieda, Dome. So there are some new arms that are in the system that are very well positioned to really do well this year.
Yeah, both Mason Molina and Brayden Davis, the other parts of that Springfield rotation that we haven't talked about, both pitched really well in their Double A debuts. Impressed in many different ways.
Yeah, and I think the reason they kept Lynn starting until the end was because he doesn't throw from the left side. They want to have an entire left-handed rotation there at Springfield, which
Yeah,
they almost have.
yeah, yeah. Come on, Lynn. Like, have Cijntje. Cijntje's right there. He can teach you how to throw with both hands. I don't know what. What are you waiting for?
There
Maybe
you
you'll
go.
stumble onto something.
So, talking about Springfield, what do you think about this run of Grand Slams? It's obviously a coincidence, but I mean, apparently, somebody went back and did the research. It hadn't happened Grand Slams in the first three games of the season in the Texas League for the last 40 years. 40 years since that happened, and that's what Springfield did.
It doesn't make sense, Brian, but it was fun. Good for Dakota Harris. What a weekend Dakota Harris had. An 11th round draft pick who has kind of lingered around the Peoria Springfield rosters for a couple of years now. To see him hit a grand slam and a 3-run home run in Springfield's opener, and then to see him go grand slam again the next day, like staying on pitches and playing first and playing third, like that was just a really interesting, great development for him. And then to watch John Gazdar, who everybody loves simply because of his name, and he's a heck of a baseball player. But
And a very intelligent. He's a guy that I think might be a coach someday. Just in my limited interaction with him, intelligent guy, seems to be really clued in on what's going around him. But anyway, go ahead.
no, that's fascinating, Brian. That's actually really interesting, and that's probably part of the reason why the Cardinals were a little bit more aggressive with him being a letter. I think he was an 11th or 12th rounder. I can never remember the 10, 11, 12. I always
He's
get those
definitely
mixed
a
up.
day three in the old world. There
Yeah,
is no day three anymore, but he was a day three guy.
yeah. So I think he and Harris were both 11th, but he might have been a 10th rounder. Anyways, to see them both hit home runs, hit grannies over the weekend, so cool, so much fun. That Springfield team was playing with so much energy. Noah Mendlinger hitting a home run. I maintain that in different situations, that guy would be on the Cardinals team. Like there's something there with that young man and the way he plays, and so I
Very,
don't know.
very, very strong, positive personality. He's kind of a glue. He's a stereotypical get your uniform dirty kind of guy, but he's a guy that keeps people loose and that they rally around.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think Brody Moore, because he's a better shortstop than Noah Mendlinger is. That's probably why Brody Moore is at AAA and Noah Mendlinger is at AA. Although Noah Mendlinger can play everywhere on the diamond.
I predicted that's one of the few mistakes I made because I'll take a quick bow. I predicted I think 23 of the 26
Yeah,
Memphis or 20 3 of the 28 Memphis players, and I think I got everybody on Springfield. I had 30 names in all fairness, but I got all 28 out of that 30. But one mistake I made, I thought Mendlinger was going to be at AAA. I really did.
Yeah, I'm still surprised by that. And again, not to criticize the new player development, and I know it's all about utility role, but
Well,
I
they
don't get
know.
it.
I mean, they know they have a lot more to base that on than me. I'm talking about what I saw with the eye test,
Yeah,
during spring training.
yeah, absolutely. So then not to I feel like if we could, Brian, I could spend the next 2 hours just gushing about what's going on at Springfield early on. So on to Peoria.
Yeah, and they got a couple of very interesting guys. Jalen Flores, who was again one X round. I forget, was he 11th, 12th,
11th rounder.
11th rounder, as a shortstop from the University of Texas. Tall, rangy guy, is playing third base now, and does a really good job defensively. And I think with a little more work offensively, he's a guy that could work his way on the prospect list. And then there's Cade McGee, who all spring long, all they would say is when McGee hits the ball, he hits it hard. And the fact he can play second and third, and they had him even catching, says that they're gonna try to make sure that he's a guy that they can move up and use in a multi-position role on multiple rosters.
Yeah, I can't help but think that Cade McGee is going to end up being the Zach Levinson of this season. Maybe not all the way up to Double A. We'll see how it goes, especially because, like you said, he's probably going to catch 1 day a week. Tonight, rather Tuesday night, he's playing second base. He's a really good defensive third baseman. All the things that you mentioned, Brian. Um, that team, the only thing that stopped that team from going undefeated this weekend was a weird bullpen. It just they don't really have, and this happens a lot at the lower levels of the minor leagues, and this is part of why the lower levels of the minor leagues are so hard to kind of evaluate. Is there really isn't great. I mean, as bad as relief pitching is at the major league level, and as inconsistent and bad as it is at AAA and AA, when you get into the high A and low A, it is a mess. And some players that probably shouldn't be in an affiliated baseball got hammered for Peoria, and but they are because you need that pitching, and you're not going to get it anywhere else. So they just didn't pitch well, and it cost Peoria some wins. But that offense is fantastic and fun. And even when were getting beat hard on Sunday, like 13-6 at one point, or 13-4, they just kept
They
coming
kept
back
they
and clawing
kept they
back.
kept pulling back. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, and that's depth too. The depth is not just their starters. It's just not Rainiel Rodriguez hitting a monster home run or Ty Peak going opposite field. It's up and down that lineup and the reserves. Even Miguel Villarreal, who got a small sniff on Sunday, had a little bit of an impact in that game. So again, hitting depth's really interesting at that level.
I'm waiting to see Jesus Baez take off. I watched him very closely in spring training because we had heard all the things about his indifferent play, and I didn't see it. I didn't see it. I saw a
Yeah,
young man who was playing the game, and maybe the coaches wouldn't have tolerated it. I don't know,
yeah.
but I think Jesus Baez is going to be okay.
Yeah, he was really impressive this weekend. Again, the stat line might not show it. He made one kind of I'm not going to call it a bonehead base running play, but it was over aggressive. It was a fly out between the pitcher and the first baseman and the second baseman on the infield grass. And he rounded first and went to second, even though the ball dropped. And he was never going to make it to second. It was a little over aggressive, a little boneheaded, but he followed that up by making a couple of really stellar, really smart base or plays at shortstop that I never, like I said, I watched quite a bit of him last year in the Mets organization after the Cardinals traded for him, and he made plays this weekend that he did not make all of last year, and at least again, and I wish I could remember the sample. I want to say it was like 25 games because it was nearly 100 at bats that I watched. It was like a 25 game sample at third and second and a little short, and he did not make that play. He did not make at least 2 of those plays that he made this weekend. He's in better physical shape, and he looks more committed.
Yeah, yeah, definitely not overweight. Definitely not pudgy. I mean, he's a stocky guy, but he's as opposed to a Flores, who's more of a beanpole type. But enough on Baez, I guess.
Yeah.
Now there is a new outfielder that will probably be joining Peoria. At least we think so. And he's a guy that our own Kyle Reis called a tooled up prospect. Tell us about Mr. Brayden Smith and why you like the Cardinals' acquisition of him. And by the way, Smith, I think folks know, came to the Cardinals as Nick Riquet was put on outright waivers. Apparently, Boston wanted him, so they said, "Hey, we'll give you some, we'll give you something for him," and that something was Brayden Smith.
Yeah, Baltimore's in such a bad spot right now with their
Or
left-handed
Baltimore.
really.
I said Boston. I meant Baltimore. Excuse me.
You're fine. But they're in such a bad spot that the Cardinals took advantage of this. Obviously Nick Raquet was not in the quote unquote cards for
No,
the St. Louis
no,
Cardinals.
clearly
And
not. He got sent out really early in camp. And as bad as the relief has been, his phone never rang. So it was clear that, like you said, he was on the outs. And so, why not get something for him? In fact, I'm surprised they protected him coming out of camp because, again, in my opinion, I think both Graceffo and your friend Packy Naughton probably both should have been on the Cardinals roster. And I'm waiting to see Packy get his chance. But anyway, I got off Brayden Smith. Sorry, go ahead.
no, no. So I think that I think that this is going to be, again, total guess. I think that this is something that we're going to see that maybe we didn't see with the last regime, right? Like uh Richie Palacios for Andrew Kittredge was the last time that the Cardinals kind of made an interesting move with a guy on the 40 man that wasn't just like release him, or put him through waivers and whatever happens. Like you knew these guys, you weren't going to be able to make a trade, right? Like you couldn't do it with Luke and Baker over the years. All these guys that they've, anyways. I'm just saying that they haven't done anything like this, and
You
now it's
mean
starting
got
to
you
be,
mean got something for a guy that they didn't want anymore?
exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Or even had a guy, kept a guy on the roster, knowing that they might have value to some other team somewhere down the line. Like I've questioned this Brian Torres thing. I can't like quite square it in my mind. Like, how does this guy get a 40 man spot? And it don't, other than his utility and his contact tool,
He
which the
hits
Cardinals love.
300 and gets on base a lot.
But again, that more than likely though, that's not going to translate at the major league level.
No.
It may not. But what he is he's the kind of guy that somewhere in the next couple of months, some team might say, "Man, we just need a left-handed bench bat. We what who And the Cardinals could say, "Hey, we've got a guy. We don't know if we're going to be able to utilize him. Yeah, tell me a little bit about this kid that you have in the Florida Complex League, who's 17 years old, who's throwing 93 miles an hour with that interesting release angle. Maybe we can make a deal there." And then they make a deal for that guy and they develop him into something. So like that's why Brian Torres is still on the 40 man. That's why Cesar Prieto is still on the 40 man, because actually you might be able to turn them into wild cards, into toolsy wild cards. And that's fascinating because I don't feel like that's something that the previous administration did. And I feel like they almost actively avoided it.
So, do you think Brayden Smith is going to be like the next generation of Brian Torres? He's a second baseman, corner outfield kind of guy. Is that where you're going with this?
No, it's interesting. It's somebody mentioned to me the last time that the Cardinals did something like this was trading Oscar Mercado for John Torres and Jan
Oh.
Torres.
Hmm.
And of course, whoever said it to me, I'm sorry. I had every intent of remembering what your Twitter handle was. I do not remember. Remember, but there was another piece of that deal, and even that doesn't really count, but it's still kind of close to what we're talking about. And so, more than likely, if you're doing your betting odds here, he's going to be more Jan Torres than he is Brian Torres. Like more than
Okay.
likely, you're talking about a 17th rounder, kind of a overly twitchy, not a quick twitch, but like a really twitchy second base outfielder who swings left-handed, who makes enough contact to stay interesting, takes enough walks to stay interesting, and has power that he just doesn't know how to get to. But more than likely, he'll fizzle out. I mean, this is just the reality of these kind of moves. More than likely, he's going to fizzle out, but there are tools there to build on.
All right. And the Cardinals made another trade the day before, and this was the player to be named later from the Sonny Gray trade. And this one was with Boston, not Baltimore. And this is Patrick Galle. He'll probably be at Palm Beach. What do you know about him?
Big fastball. Everybody's going to talk about his cutter because that's probably his best, like from a measurability standpoint. That's his best pitch. But his fastball can get up to the mid 90s. A couple years ago, he was hitting 100 at tread, and so that's kind of his calling card.
But he
When
has
you,
control issues, right?
I was going to say, when you go back to the tread stuff, even in those videos, you can tell he doesn't command anything particularly well. And he was also working on an interesting sweeper that I think he's all but scrapped. I'm still trying to figure out all that. But yeah, no, command is another issue. Again, a wild card here. Cardinals decided to hunt velocity and interesting characteristics and an interesting arm angle, kind of over the top, but also like more out of his head than your traditional like over the top from a release angle standpoint. So it's interesting characteristics to go with an interesting fastball, an interesting cutter, and maybe a third pitch in there to help a bullpen and maybe developed another bullpen on.
And that's I think you just answered my question, but I want to come back to it. And that's you think Galle's going to be a bullpen guy?
I would assume so, yes. Probably not fair for me to assume. I have not had any conversations about it, but that seems to make so much sense to me, Brian. If for no other reason than the amount of starting pitchers that the Cardinals have in the organization that they cannot find starting roles for.
Well, and the fact that, as you said, the high A bullpens, while they have a lot of names, don't necessarily have a lot of guys who are going to necessarily excel in that role. Although we saw down in Palm Beach, um, uh, didn't Sheligowski had a really nice outing. I think Eschman's made an appearance. No, Dreesen. So that you know, some of these guys that were drafted last year that aren't going to be starters may be able to carve out a role.
Yeah, transitioning into Palm Beach, Brian, that I want to say it was because they played Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It would have been Thursday's relief appearance was the highlight of the entire weekend for me at Palm Beach. It was Alex Breckheimer. He
Ah,
pitched
that's right, Breckheimer.
yeah, he pitched 3 innings. He went out for a fourth. I think he might have got recorded one out. He was terrible in the fourth. He was gassed. He was up past 50 pitches. But those first 3 innings, he dominated. I mean, not like he blew through Port St. Lucie. They did not stand a chance. High fastballs, low fastballs. Finish a guy off with a slider in the third inning. It was the most impressive 3 innings um, of relief that I've seen so far this season, this early season, other than Nolan Sparks, who threw 4 beautiful relief innings for Peoria. But we're going to stick with Palm Beach. And then the next day, that would have been Saturday.
By the way, Nolan Sparks is it looks like he's going to get a start coming up.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch that too. I'll tell you, he earned it. He pitched magnificent the other night. But and then it was really fun. Again, I'm sorry, what might have got it. Might have been Friday, might have been Saturday. I think it was Saturday. That was Cade Crossland starting, making his organizational debut, followed by Shiligowski making his organizational debut, followed by Caden Eschman making his organizational debut. And all three of them, Crossland, his velocity wasn't where I thought it would be. It was low 90s, but he pitched fine. Shiligowski pitched really decently, and Eschman pitched amazingly. Uh, Again, I was talking to our good friend Kareem Hawk about it, and that curveball of Caden Eschman is going to be a weapon. It is fierce and filthy. So again, we're learning about some of these rosters, and it's been exciting to watch some of these guys make their organizational debuts at Palm Beach.
Yeah, and at some point, we're going to see Van Dyke, probably Odell, Jack Martinez, excuse me, had a nice start. Of course, Young is there, so Palm Beach has got the makings of a pretty good staff. I'm not so sure about the offense. We're going to have to see about that. Jairo Padilla is out with an injury, and then Michael DeTalo got injured first or second game. Uh, Mitchell made the team. I'm curious what you thought about that. It's a little bit of a risk taking Ryan Mitchell, who's a high schooler last year, who's still trying to find his home defensively, and dropping him into low A. But the Cardinals did it.
Yeah, he's made a couple. He got thrown out. So on Tuesday night, he got thrown out. He's made a couple interesting base running decisions that haven't quite worked out for him. He has not looked overmatched at the plate. He's been fine. Luckily he hasn't been tested so much in the field. So I'm glad that he's getting the opportunity. I do until they prove themselves wrong. I will stay on the bandwagon that the Cardinals are allowing us fans to jump on, and it's that they're going to challenge their prospects and also put them at the appropriate level that they need, especially the younger prospects, the highly thought of top draft choices. So I'm on board with the Mitchell thing, and I'm anxious to see how it develops. You can see that especially the low breaking pitch, the low off speed pitch in on him is going to be a huge issue for him. That's going to be the first area where he's going to need to develop because he can get beat with that easy right now, and it's just a matter of finding that and how to adjust to it.
But how many low A pitchers can hit that spot consistently?
Exactly, Brian. Exactly. So hopefully he'll be able to capitalize on the opportunities he gets. Jake Gurovich has played okay. It's really been like Jonathan Mejia has kind of been the catalyst for that Palm Beach offense so far. You mentioned Jacob Odell. Jacob Odell pitched in relief on Tuesday night and struck out a couple guys, but his command was all over the place, unfortunately, which is again his big question mark. So hopefully he can refine along
He's
the way.
still got a lot of rust to shake off.
Yeah, that's for sure.
All
Yes.
right. So we took a quick tour around the system and kind of the news with the various players. Kyle, what else do you want to cover before we close this issue? I think we've discussed all the hot news that was on my list anyway.
Brian, I hadn't really thought about it. I think that really covers it all until as you were asking the question, I was asking myself what else stood out. And eventually, and maybe right now is eventually, people are going to start asking questions about Tin Cans.
Oh,
And it was it was not a good first AAA weekend. First 8 games, nine, two appearances for Tin Cans. On over the weekend, his velocity was down to 90, 91 miles an hour. In his first appearance, it was 93, and he got smoked. Uh, I mean, a huge long home run. It's not good to start the 2026 season for Tin Cans, and that's something that we're going to end up having to keep a pretty close eye on.
yeah, yeah.
It,
Cardinals have challenged him, put him at AAA, but let's face it, he's been at AA for an awful long time, and the clock is ticking. He's in his second year of his 3 years of up and down ability, being optioned out. That is, and the Cardinals need to figure out if Tink Hence is going to be able to contribute or not. And the hope was that he would take to this relief role and pitch his way into the same. I mean, the opportunity is there. The opportunity is there in the St. Louis bullpen. He's
yeah,
got the 40-man spot, but he's got to take care of business at Memphis first, or it doesn't matter.
yeah, yeah. It was really bad. Extension was shortened again. I mean, it was heartbreaking, honestly, Brian. If you want to know the truth, watching that appearance over the weekend was heartbreaking.
Well, it's only a beginning, and
Yeah,
so hopefully, those who are struggling will continue to improve, and those who are playing well will continue to play well, and the Cardinals will set a new record for wins in a season across the system. You got in a conversation on X about that with somebody the other night, and we went back to like 60 years to
yeah,
to a to what was the high watermark for wins in the system. And we're not going to get ahead of ourselves. I think we understand, especially the Peoria and Palm Beach have their holes, but it's going to be a fun year in the minor league system. There's no doubt about it.
I'm excited, Brian. A great week, a great first week of Memphis, a great first weekend of the other affiliates. Every game had something exciting or something to get really fired up about. And Brian, maybe it's just prisoner of the moment, but I don't feel like I've felt that way uh, to start the year in years.
Yeah, yeah. And I went back and looked just for the fun of it. 54 players earned promotions this year from where they finished last year to this year. And that's not. I don't have a lot of context from the past to know whether that's high or low. My perception is it's kind of high.
Yeah,
And of those, 20 are prospects on our top prospect list. And yeah, there's the Weatherholts, but there's a lot of other guys there as well who have now moved up. As Kyle said, they're going to be challenged at these new levels. And so, we need to be patient if they don't necessarily click the first week or two. I think, a guy that we both have high hopes for example, at Memphis, Colton Ledbetter, has struck out, like 60 or 70% of his at bats, but it's a new guy at a new level. And
yeah,
we went a whole edition without even talking about Joshua Baez.
yeah, yeah. Who again, like you said, has struggled. He hit a double tonight on Tuesday night, which was really good. But yeah, it's look like you said, it's a long season, even for the low A, even for the complex league and the DSL when they get fired up, and just got to take it one step at a time and get excited when it's time to get excited and evaluate as we go along.
Yeah, and we're only about a month away from the start of the complex league. The
Yeah,
schedule was moved up a month from when it traditionally was, which of course it means it ends a month sooner, which means the new draft picks don't get a chance to play there. But that's the way it is. So at least the long grind for the kids in extended spring training won't go for beyond another 4 weeks. And I'm especially interested in seeing more of the two shortstops who came over from the Dominican Summer League, and I'm talking about Sebastian Dos Santos and Miguel Hernandez, who are going to be, I think, a
yeah,
key part of that Florida Complex League roster if they don't get called up sooner. And the other thing about these guys that are in extended spring training right now, if there's an injury at Palm Beach, they're going to be the first guys to be called upon.
yeah. Absolutely, Brian. Way to set the stage. We're right around the corner. It's so exciting and we'll be talking about 6 affiliated games a day.
That's right, and we recap them every morning. If you want to quickly go to one place and read a little bit about all the games the night before, click on the link to go to the box score, get a lot of detail. And our local reporters in the affiliates will be providing their team reports now. They've started up as well because, of course, we can't be everywhere. So we've got people on the ground and at the ballparks across the minor league system. And as always, you can get your copy of the Cardinal Nation Prospect Guide. And please subscribe to the Cardinal Nation so you can read about all this good stuff that our writers are putting out there.
Absolutely, Brian. It seemed like you got a good group of local reporters this year.
Yeah, it's a great deal. They're typically journalism seniors or juniors or communications, and they're looking to hone their writing skills, get some experience covering a professional team, and it's always great to have eyes and ears at the ballpark because things get picked up and you hear things that you don't normally if you're not right there.
That's
Uh,
right.
so with that, we will close the April 8th edition of Wednesday with Walton and Reis. Just a warning, next week will be the 15th of April. And if you're like me, you don't have your taxes done yet. So make sure you do that so the IRS doesn't come after you.
Yeah, hit up C70. He is our tax attorney, our tax man. Daniel Shoptaw will take care of you.
There you have it, C70 on X, Daniel. And he is the king of bad puns and dad jokes, which Kyle, again, is not authorized to make. So, and that's a good thing for our podcast here.
Thank goodness, Brian.
All right. Well, with that, we'll close this week and we'll see everybody next time around on Wednesday with Walton and Reis. Thank you very much for watching and listening. Bye now.